Everybody knows by now that the Australian Defence Force is in a lot of trouble for the 39 Afghan civilians that have been killed, and the 19 Australian soldiers who are going to be facing charges as a result of these murders, as has been uncovered by an investigation. Now, we're all aware of that. But now, an additional 13 Special Air Service members have been given a notices of likely dismissal regarding their involvement in the massacres. Now, they're not alleging that these soldiers had any direct involvement in the killings, but that it's more likely they may have known about it and didn't do anything, like they did not report it to their superiors, etc. And Australia's Prime Minister and top military commander have both apologized to the Afghans for the incident, of which the current Afghan president said was completely unacceptable, and it very much most certainly is. Now, you may know that Australia currently maintains about 400 soldiers inside of Afghanistan for what they call a peacekeeping effort along with the US and other allies. Of course, that's a very strange way of phrasing an invasion, a mass murder of the population, and continued military occupation. I really wouldn't call that peacekeeping. I would call that imperialist occupation, like I just did. Now, there was a report that came out, and there's some very, very gruesome details, some of the horrible facts that have come out. Prisoners, farmers, and civilians from 2009 to 2013, and they were murdered by these Afghan-based Australian soldiers. Now, here's some of what has been going on, which the report blames on a, quote, warrior culture. Junior soldiers were told to get their first kill by shooting prisoners in a practice known as blooding. Weapons and other items were planted near Afghan bodies to cover up crimes. An additional 2 incidents could constitute a war crime of cruel treatment. Is anybody actually surprised that this happened? Nobody who's honest or doesn't have their head buried in the sand. These kinds of things have been going on for years inside of Afghanistan, right from the very day that the invasion began. We could point to all the crimes that have been committed by other forces. For example, the United States. They had U.S. soldiers essentially attacking a Doctors Without Borders hospital, even after being told that it was a hospital. Doctors Without Borders went and told them, stop shooting, you're shooting one of our hospitals. And they continued to do so because it was about intimidating the population and intimidating Doctors Without Borders from reporting what was many reports of mistreatment of prisoners and possibly killings of civilians. Now, if all of this wasn't enough, so it's not just the original 19 who were basically up on charges, but 13 more who weren't directly involved but seem to have had some knowledge of it, have been given notice that they might be fired because they knew about it and didn't say anything. Now, here's where it gets interesting. China criticized Australia for it in a political cartoon that many thought was a bit extreme, or in some felt were graphic, which I feel was pretty accurate. Now, as you can imagine, a rightful criticism of an imperialist country doesn't go without being condemned. And Australia has demanded an apology from the Chinese government for the publishing of this political cartoon. It seems highly unlikely that China will apologize for it because, what's really more offensive here? The fact that civilians were massacred, or a cartoon, a political cartoon, which criticizes the crime? I mean, we really need to think about that, and maybe the Australian government needs to get its priorities straight, that one of these should be a big outrage and the other one is an expression of freedom of speech. And just so the Australian government knows, it's the cartoon that's freedom of speech. But I digress. And something else I also noticed that was a bit a bit irritating. The smugness of a lot of Americans talking about this and condemning the Australians. You're terrible. You're horrible. This is an unacceptable thing. It's disgusting. You might want to take a bit of a quick look into the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan before you say something like that. Or maybe one of the countless other countries you've occupied during that time and the damage you've done there, because I really don't think that America has any moral high ground to stand on when it comes to massacres in Afghanistan. I think that's just a little bit ridiculous, and maybe it's something. You know what? It's cringeworthy. I don't have to explain to you, my audience, why this is a problem. This is very obvious enough to many of us. But it does point out something also interesting. It's not just the U.S. who's carrying out a crime in Afghanistan. And to some degree, sometimes we hear about what the U.K. does there as well. But now it's important to remember that there are other allies inside the country, like Australia or Canada, primarily Commonwealth countries, and if not members of NATO, allies of NATO, who have been able to just kind of fly under the radar on this whole situation for quite some time, because all the focus has been put on the United States. And it's important to let these other countries, like Canada and Australia, not to think that they're invincible and that they can't be criticized for the crimes that they carry out as well. Because as they may have seemed to have forgot, they are imperialist occupiers as well. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.